Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing Game 75 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights, in which the Sharks have won 4-3 in overtime. So suddenly, the Sharks have managed to string together multiple wins in a row. It is only 2 wins in a row, but that is technically multiple. And just based on how awful the San Jose Sharks have been over these past couple of months, even just 2 wins in a row is an extremely impressive feat that I was not expecting until the end of this season, right? I was expecting the Sharks would just be able to win maybe a game here or there, but mostly just losses. And the fact that they came against actually 2 playoff teams makes it even more so impressive. It might not be the best thing for their tanking chances, and as we'll see later on, the Sharks have kind of shot up in the standings at this point. It was still at the very least an entertaining game to watch, especially with the couple of new faces that were in the lineup for the San Jose Sharks. But let's get into this game in which the Sharks actually played rather well. In fact, especially when you consider, again, how bad the Sharks have been recently, this was probably one of their better games of the season. They really did a good job of controlling the pace of this game compared to the previous one against the Winnipeg Jets, where the Sharks did win by an even more impressive score of 3-0. That was a game in which their goaltender kind of had to bail them out a lot, and frequently the ice was tilted in favor of the Winnipeg Jets. Here tonight, of course, there were moments in which the Golden Knights were able to skate some circles around the San Jose Sharks, but I would say more often than not, the Sharks were the actual better team here tonight, which is definitely quite impressive, especially when you consider the historic record that the Golden Knights, especially in the regular season, have against the Sharks. So this one starts off with a Ferraro goal that makes it 1-0 San Jose, and then it is a Lindblom goal that makes it 2-0 San Jose. But if there is anything that we have learned this season, is that even a 2-0 lead in the first period is the most precarious of leads for the San Jose Sharks. We have seen them so many times blow this type of lead. Even just this month, it's happened a couple of times. And once this Nick Hague goal went in to cut the lead in half, it felt as though we may very well go that direction. And then once in the second period, it was Barbashev who would make it 2-2. It again felt as though, okay, here we go. This is going to be a 6-2 win for the Golden Knights. But the Sharks managed to bring it back, take back the lead. A Tomas Hertl goal, his 21st of the season, makes it 3-2 by the end of that middle frame. In the third period, the only goal scored is from the Vegas side by Michael Amadio, and we would then head to post-regulation play, and we take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights. A lot of success in the overtime thus far this season. We take a look at the Sharks, a lot of failures in the overtime this season, so it felt as though the Golden Knights might be able to get the extra point, but thankfully, I guess, it is Pietrangelo, the Golden Knights' probably best defenseman, at least on paper, makes the pass right to Logan Couture, who gets the breakaway, goes for his signature 5-hole move, and maybe the somewhat inexperienced Laurent Brossoit lets that one in, and the Sharks end up getting this 2-point win, another home win, which is basically just considering the previous one against Winnipeg Jets, which was also a home win. This increases the amount of home wins that they have on the entire season by 33%, going from 6 to 8 in the span of a couple of days. And like I said, the Sharks, they win it 4-3 in overtime. However, now if we take a look at the standings, like I mentioned earlier, the Sharks have shot up, and this is not going to help their tanking situation. With the win here tonight, they go up to 57 points, and all 3 other teams in this situation were in action. And besides the overtime loss, a miraculous one at that, to the Boston Bruins by the Columbus Blue Jackets, both the Ducks and the Blackhawks once again lost in regulation. And so the Sharks now 4th last in the league with 57, the Ducks stand pat with 56, and it is both the Blue Jackets and the Blackhawks now holding down those bottom 2 spots with 54. And this is even worse off for the San Jose Sharks because of the fact that there is now more than 1 game of distance between them and last place, meaning if the Sharks were to lose the rest of their games, even if the Blue Jackets and Blackhawks managed to get a win, they would still both find themselves behind the Sharks in the standings. So it is going to take the Sharks not only managing to lose the rest of their 7 games, but both the Blue Jackets and Blackhawks would have to manage to get at least a win for themselves, if not like 3 overtime losses or something like that, if the Sharks still want to have the best possible odds at Connor Bedard. So this win tonight definitely feels good, especially with those new faces in the lineups. It was a fun game to watch, but in terms of the grand scheme of things, not a very good one for San Jose. Moving on to the players to talk about, we have the top line here. Agazino ends up getting sent back down to the Barracuda, and who gets called up? It is Thomas Bordlow. As we know, Bordlow had already made his NHL debut last season with the San Jose Sharks, played 8 games on a line frequently with Rudolph Balcers and Noah Gregor, and looked very good in that particular role. 5 points in the 8 games that he 5 points in the 8 games that he ended up playing, but he didn't end up getting a spot. But that kind of seemingly was the theme for the San Jose Sharks this season, not to really give any of these younger players a spot and just kind of roll with a bunch of veterans. But as of late, over these past couple of weeks, the Sharks have obviously been giving more of a chance to some of these Barracuda players, and it was Bordlow's turn. And I thought he had a decent game. If I was going to give a score on 10, I'd probably give around a 5.5. Nothing amazing, but also not too terrible. His even strength play was okay. It was kind of a worrying situation where a lot of people were talking about how Bordlow was maybe not the best defensively and he'd have to clean up in that particular area. I don't think Bordlow was necessarily bad defensively here tonight. Nothing amazing, but certainly not terrible. So that was good to see. The one thing that I was a bit surprised about was actually how ineffective he found himself to be on the Sharks power play. So he was immediately put, like Eklund was, on the top unit with players like Karlsson, like Tomas Hertl. You know, it was certainly loaded up. Obviously, there's no Timo Meier, there's no Alex Barabanov due to injury and due to trade in Meier's case, but still a lot of pretty good players here for the San Jose Sharks, and yet whenever Bordlow managed to touch the puck, he kind of just lost it, and considering he was very effective on the power play for the San Jose Barracuda, it came as a surprise to me. So at even strength, while I thought he was pretty good, his power play should hopefully, at the very least, improve as he gets more looks, or at the very least, if he gets more looks. When it comes to his line mates, I thought Couture had a pretty good game, but Zetterlund I thought was definitely one of his better games as a San Jose Shark. When it comes to the second line, I did enjoy this second line, and at least earlier on in the game, it felt as though they fell off a bit as it went on, but Hertl had a very strong game, but it was Martin Kaut, who may be somewhat under the radar, also had a very good game for himself. And this, goes back to the Matt Nieto trade from a couple of months ago. I was not a huge fan of that trade when it was made. In fact, I really didn't like it. And while I'm still not a big fan of one pieces of the return, Jacob McDonald, I am starting to grow a bit on Martin Kaut. In a straight player for draft pick trade for Matt Nieto, the Sharks probably couldn't have gotten any better than like a 4th round pick. And honestly, having seen Kaut play over these past few games, even if he is somewhat older than a prospect at 23 years of age, it feels as though Kaut is probably 99% chance to be better than whatever the Sharks could have possibly gotten in the 4th round had they actually managed to get a draft pick like that in return, unless they had gotten just exceptionally lucky. So I certainly, the trade doesn't necessarily bother me as much, just based on how Kaut has played recently. When it comes to the third line of Sturm, Gregor, and Labanc, in particular, the player who really stood out to me was Kevin Labanc, who I thought had a fantastic game here tonight. Doesn't appear on the score sheet, which is usually kind of like the big thing for Labanc, because he doesn't necessarily do the little things correctly, and so when he has a good game, it's usually because he pops in with a goal or a goal and an assist, something like that. But I thought he did actually some really strong things in the offensive zone, even if it didn't end up leading to a goal. When it comes to the fourth line, a bit of a disappointment, not because of their play, but because of early on in the second period, Oscar Lindblom ends up leaving with an injury, and he had been playing rather well over the past few games as a duo, in particular with Steven Lorentz. But the fourth line generally, if we count Lindblom when he was there in the first period, and the double shifting sometimes, the situation where Lorentz and VL found themselves playing with a whole slew of players, I thought they looked rather good, so that was a nice little continuation from the fourth line. When it comes defensively, we have both the duo of Vlasic and Erik Karlsson. I added a point tracker for Erik Karlsson, 91 points on the season now. Did not add one here tonight, so needs to be able to get 9 more over the last 7 games. Certainly possible, but not necessarily easy to do either. This was a decent game for this pairing. Nothing super amazing, nothing blow me away. Karlsson didn't necessarily do a ton here tonight, and they definitely didn't end up being the best pairing, and I don't think either of these players were necessarily the best defensemen for the San Jose Sharks, because that title will actually go to a player here on the second pairing. The Sharks have had a lot of debuts this season, not necessarily just NHL debuts, but also season debuts like with Bordlow, like with William Eklund. But the player who has impressed me the most by far out of those players definitely has to be Henry Thrun here tonight. An absolutely outstanding performance here tonight against the Vegas Golden Knights on both both sides of the ice. Really, really impressive. I gave Bordlow like a 5.5 on 10. I gave Eklund in his debut about a 6 on 10. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Thrun, as a score on 10, would get about a 9 on 10. He really was just that good. Offensively, it was pretty solid. Obviously, 2 assists in his debut as a defenseman, quite good. The first assist, nothing super amazing with the Ferraro one, but the second one I definitely liked. Could have gone with the safer play of just passing to Ferraro, but I like that he goes with the slightly more aggressive one, reads that the Golden Knights are going for that line change, so Lindblom has room to work with. He feeds to Lindblom and ends up being a secondary assist for Thrun, but I was more so impressed with his defensive awareness in this game. Usually when it comes to these rookies, they try and do a bit too much. They try and watch the puck a bit too much, and yet Thrun just seemed like an absolute seasoned veteran here tonight. Not only did he have better defensive awareness than many of the other Sharks defensemen who have made their sort of debuts here, like a Nick Cicek or something like that, but he honestly even had better defensive awareness than some of the San Jose Sharks defensemen that were playing in this game here tonight. Players like McDonald and Ferraro have never necessarily impressed me this season with their defensive play all that much, and Thrun just in just single game managed to just blow both of them out of the water. Thrun was just really, really that good. Now, this was just one game. Maybe it was just a fantastic game for him and he's going to fall back down to earth, but this definitely gives me a lot of hope for what he can do, not just for the rest of the season, but going into next year. He really was, I will say for the 10th time, he really was just that good. Fantastic game for him. And then finally, let us talk quickly about James Reimer here tonight. He had that amazing performance in the previous game against the Winnipeg Jets. Here tonight, they definitely didn't need him to be as great because the Sharks played rather well, and it's a good thing for that because Reimer was not really on his game here tonight. Ends up letting in 3 goals on just 12 shots, at least early on. Makes a few more saves after that, but not necessarily the best of stats. Not a surprise that Reimer would kind of fall off a bit. This has been generally a bad season for James Reimer, so even though he had that great game against Winnipeg, generally the average level of play is not supposed to be good, and that's exactly what we got here tonight. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday, where they will take on the Arizona Coyotes, a team that used to be in the bottom 5 conversation with the San Jose Sharks, but have recently shot up due to some solid play. And so the Sharks, surprisingly enough, might actually have their hands full if they want to try and string together even 3 wins in a row. Class dismissed.